lynching, it was, I think, the only one of those 1920s lynching of where that there was a concerted effort by some of the local people to get to the bottom of it and to actually get to do something about it instead of covering it up. For one thing, but the story, as I understand it, was that the lady was ironing, and you know, the old thing when you had the shotgun houses with the breezeway and the dog trot or whatever you want to call it, and that she was hard of hearing to start with, although some people are claiming that she wasn't all there, but I think it was more that she was hard of hearing, and she was frightened by this black man who was around back, and she didn't hear him to start with, who supposedly was there just to ask could he get a dipper full of water, because, and the story that I heard was that he had gotten word that somebody in his family had gotten grievously ill or so forth, and he was working on a road construction crew that was going on right then, and the myriad attempts to complete a Fort Myers to the East Coast Highway, which happened. And Henry County, which was a new county at that time, because we're talking 1925, 1926, and Henry County wasn't broken off from Lee until 1923, had passed a road bond with the understanding that they would hire local people to work on the crew, but the contractor or contractors, and I don't know exactly who they were right there at that time, although I do know that earlier contractors had been a D.B. McCormick, who was also allied with what was his name, Edgar Carlton, who would have been, I think, a son-in-law or a grandson-in-law of F.A. Henry, were road contractors, and they used chain gang people to do all of their work to start with.
Instead of the local people, and that made the local people very angry.
And this made, because of the fact that the LaBelle area at that time, you were either rich or you worked off of trapping and barter on it, and that they did not get the job. That this black man, and I think Henry Patterson.
Yes.
But the story was that he had gotten word that somebody in the family was grievously ill. Now, at that time, there was very little public transportation available to anyone who was of African descent or a person of color.
Was that in the 1925 era?
1926.
Okay.
And that I think, well, that would have been the time when Alva Burke had a taxi cab service that did the area, and also it all did boat service, and they refused, most of them refused to carry anybody who was of African descent, but that he had gone to LaBelle in order to find some way to get down to Fort Myers so that he could get north to wherever the family was.
Okay, so he went up to the woman and asked her for water.
Oh, and that was to ask her for water.
Right.
And his name was?
Because she was hard of hearing, when she turned around and saw this black man, it was an automatic scream, because at that time, if you go into the early censuses for that area, even up to the 1930 census, there were very, very few blacks or mulattoes who lived in the immediate LaBelle, Fort Deneau area.
So let's get to what happened.
All right, so she screams, and evidently the house is close enough to where some of these people who were not, were waiting to be called for day labor or what have you. And of course, Patterson, when she screams, he runs.
Yeah.
Because, a white woman screams because she sees a black man, that's bad. he runs. They grab him, and they got him at a place in downtown what's now downtown LaBelle. That there used to be sort of a pond or a lake, and it was by Judge Doty's house.
Okay.
And that they got him, and that one of the first things he said to some of the group that grabbed him was, "Boss, you knows me, and you know I ain't done nothing wrong." On that. Now he breaks away from the group. They go and they grab it. They track him down and they get him. They do the typical thing about the rope around the neck and the stuff like that, and they drug him through town and so forth. And by the time they finally hung him from a tree on what is now South Bridge Street in the general vicinity of the First Christian Church, there was a pine tree that I was shown when I first moved to LaBelle, and this would have been, I'm going to say this would have been in the late summer or early fall of 1951.
Okay.
That there was this pine tree, and I was told that was the tree that they had hung the corpse from, and there were a pair of shoes at the bottom of this pine tree at that time.
Wow.
That you could see where they brought it and so forth and so on, but there was still this pair of shoes.
You saw the shoes?
These shoes, and I was told that those were the shoes that had fallen off of his feet. Now, it's a possibility that it was put, that people kept putting it up there because the majority of the people in LaBelle were still mad with the road contractors for hiring blacks at a fraction of the cost of what they had been told that they would be hired at when they voted the tax, the bond issue in on it, and that they actually arrested a group of people, and the sheriff's arrest records are available. The LaBelle Heritage Museum has the ledgers that's in on it, where they arrested I think it was, I want to say 12 or 14 different people on it, and they talked about it on it, and that what they did was, Governor Martin and John Martin would have been governor of the state of Florida at that time. They declared martial law. They got in the Florida National Guard into LaBelle. They were there to maintain peace. I have seen one photograph of showing at the old Everett Hotel, showing the National Guard, the Florida Guard people there. They show a machine gun and somebody that has got a pistol on his hip on there that was a photograph of the time on it. Now,
the trial ended up in Fort Myers.
Yeah, they actually there was never a real trial. There was a grand jury.
Yes.
And it was Judge Whitehurst, I believe, was the judge. And that when they went, a lot of the people who had been arrested to start with, and they were names of, some of them were people and others were high-to-dos, considered important people in the community, had been arrested as part of it. Now, what they did, and I cannot tell you off the top of my head many names. They were like, they're all available, and it's like various names. But what they did was they either had disappeared, they couldn't be found, or they had no memory. Now, there was one and I want to say that he was about a 9-year-old boy.
That's why somebody would
what's
write a book
interesting.
about. I wish somebody would write a book about this 9-year-old boy,
Who was,
the son of a deputy.
I can't remember,
We don't need
I'm
to
not
know.
sure on that, I'd have to go back and
Okay.
double check it. But he answered everything and told exactly what he had seen happen. And I think that he was probably the one who overheard the boss, you knows me, you know I ain't done no wrong, I ain't never done no wrong. But the judge ruled that he, because of his age, he wasn't competent to give testimony and threw the thing out on it. And nobody was ever brought to trial on it. The worst thing they did was they did the grand jury, and they held it in Fort Myers rather than in LaBelle at the time.
Well, the thing is, then that little boy went back to school in LaBelle, and they tormented him.
Well, they did that to just about everybody.
They had to move as a result. I have a whole album myself on lynching, and I have a great deal on that one. Everything I could ever find.
Well,
but I wish there would have.
The family did not totally leave the area because he was a member of. The boy was a member of the 1935 graduating class from LaBelle High School.
Okay. I had thought that he had to go away. They gave him a hard time.
What was the boy's name? Do you remember?
I can't,
God
off the top of my
knows.
head, I can't remember. I think he was. I want to say that he was a Lucky, but I'm not going to swear
I don't
to
think
it.
so. I don't think it was a Lucky. I do have the information at home, but I have a whole book just on lynchings in Florida.
Okay, but I'm just saying on this particular one that his name, it was a common family name, and
Right.
he was one. I think the 1935 graduating class from LaBelle High School was something like 5 people,
Yeah.
and he was one of the 5.
Thanks for telling us. That's interesting.
Was
isn't
one
it?
of the people's names Bass? Their last name was Bass?
We don't
I
remember.
don't. I
You
can't
recall.
remember any Basses involved with that particular lynching. There were Howards. You figure that in LaBelle you would have had Howards because that was the Howard family was one of the first 7 families in the LaBelle area. Howards and you know, it's the name, and the person that's got a lot of information on this would be Brandon Jett, who is the only PhD in history at the Curtis Center or Henry Glades of it, and Brandon has done a lot of work on that, and I steered him to a lot of the information, and Brandon's got a lot of stuff on that now. He's probably got more of it put together.
Let me ask you something, Joe. There was a lady within the past 5 or 6 years. She probably came and talked to you. She came and talked to me, where she was going to write a book on it. She came to Fort Myers.
Are you talking Teresa Proverbs?
She came in. She wanted to see where the black people sat in the jury room, and I showed her and everything. But she was going to write a book. Did she ever write a book? I never heard.
Well, if it was Teresa Proverbs, she was, what she did with a lot of the stuff that she got is that she wrote sensational stories and then sold them to less than reputable publications.
Okay, I got you. I don't remember her name, but she wanted to see where the black people sat and where the trial was.
She wanted when I first got involved with the LaBelle Heritage Museum, she came in and she wanted immediate access to archives and this, that, and the other. And I realized that she was not very good. She was, I think, actually an architect or a builder or something.
She just
like
was interested in writing
And
sensational
well, she was
stories.
interested in making money.
Okay.
But she wanted access.
You want me to answer?
And at that time, I had no idea who she was. And when she made the blanket statement that F.A. Hendry had never lived at Fort Thompson or LaBelle, period, I knew she did not know her breast from a pole in the ground.
Right. Now, what was the young black man's name who was hung? What was his name? Patterson?
Henry Patterson.
What is it?
Henry Patterson.
Okay. And who was it you said had the list of the archives all compiled and
The one that you need to contact is Brandon Jett, and that's JETT PhD at Henry Glades. He is a PhD.
Is he in a museum? Is he in the library?
He teaches at he teaches the history classes at the Curtis campus in LaBelle.
Okay.
Of SSW State, and he has printed books, and he is available. He's done a bunch of stuff on Texas. He's done a bunch of that, and one of his classes did a website on the lynching.
Oh, really?
Which is there. You do a thing on LaBelle lynching, and it's going to should be able to come up with that website.
Okay.
And also NBC Channel 2 did a thing on it.
I saw something on it, but it wasn't very much. The channel, they interviewed a black woman who was talking about, well, she was talking about the lynching here.
All right, well, now this is a totally different one. This is one that's basically LaBelle people.
Okay.
I'm one of the interviewees. Brandon's one of the interviewees, and I can't remember who all else is on it. That was done after that because of the fact that we were one of the few places where they tried to bring the guilty to things. Now, the county prosecutor at the time was H.A. Ryder, who later became a judge. In fact, he was county judge, and he was also a mayor of LaBelle, who stuck around. His children up into the 1940s were still referred to as nigger lovers.
Really?
And the judge at the time was Wesley Richards. The Richards family was so despised because of that, of trying to bring the thing to, that they finally left, the whole family left and went back to Michigan by 1930.
It happened in front of Gilliam's
Ed Fluge was the superintendent of schools, and he was married to Richard's daughter, Cora.
No, it was
And my
like a
father
grocery
knew
store,
Cora
which is
quite
the
well,
cigar bar
and so
now.
forth. And they had bought property in the LaBelle area, which had kept for years and years, and they went back. Now, part of that family came back and are
I don't think
there,
so.
but I don't know
He
how
deserved
many
what he
right
got, I
now,
think.
unless have got any written records on
Right,
the thing.
right.
Then there was the stuff that they did, where that they did in the Florida Historical Quarterly, going back to the story that they did of where that they interviewed Dr. Sam Ryder, who was one of Judge Ryder's sons, and he talked about it and about
My
how
own book. I
that
lost my
all
own
of
book. I
them
lost
were
everything in the hurricane. I had everything
put down
highlighted.
as pariahs because of the fact that they wanted to bring the miscreants, clear the thing
Right,
up,
right,
and
right.
if anybody was actually guilty of something, that they at least be brought to trial, and nobody was ever brought to trial.
Right, right. So what I need you to do is say your name, Joe Horn Thomas.
Yeah, Joseph Horn Thomas.
And that you are being interviewed.
I'm being interviewed.
And you gave me permission to do this.
Yeah, on June the 7th, 2023, and that I am a past president of the LaBelle Heritage Museum, but currently have no actual affiliation with the museum other than being a paid
Because I want to
member.
find something, but I did find a
Okay.
book.
Excellent.
I'm happy
They
about
want me
that.
in the back room. So.